Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way.
Today we're going to be continuing talking about anger, but we're going to get more into the depth of the subject, and we're going to talk about this anger analysis. Now, why do we need anger analysis? Because we don't always know why we're angry and what's going on in our lives. I'm going to start with a story about me and some anger analysis, and then I want to take you through some steps, and then we want to look at what are the reasons that people have these long-term anger problems, and then how can we put this all together, sort of an overall program for dealing with anger. This particular Sunday, and quite a number of years ago, my wife came to me and she said, "Honey, I've got some things I'd like to return after church. Is that okay with you?" And be very pious and all those kind of things. Said, "Well, honey, it's Sunday. Do we have to go out and do something like that and, and go to the store and, this is the Lord's day, so probably shouldn't do that." And so everything was fine, and we went over and we were eating at this particular place. It used to be called the Boston Market. And we were having chicken. And when we're standing there in line, it dawns on me. Right in back of Boston Market is a bookstore. And I need a book for my class the next week. And so I say to Nancy, "Honey, after we finish eating, I want to go over to that bookstore and pick up this book, because if I don't, I have to drive all the way back over here to do it." And she says, "If you're going to do that, then I'm going to Linen and Things." And I got angry. Something just rose up inside of me, and I didn't even want to eat chicken with her. And I'm trying to figure this thing out, because why am I so angry? And what is going on here? And so I had to use some of these steps that we're going to talk about here a little bit to figure out what was going on and why was I so angry. So I'm going to use that story now to go through this thing called anger analysis. And the reason we need this is because it's probably not just the short-term anger that we talked about last time and the steps that we went through to deal with that you're going to be dealing with, but in counseling, you're going to have some people that are really long-term anger problems. They might have what we call free-floating anger. That means they're hours of 5 or they're hours of 7. Or they might have bitterness or buried anger, landmines, ammunition dumps, whatever you want to call them, from the past. And we need to be able to figure that out. And in each situation, when somebody is angry, if you don't understand why they're angry, you can't really help them. And there are some cases, especially in the case of rage, it is just confused anger. And if you can't figure out how to handle that, you're not going to be able to help that person dealing in this particular area. So what are the questions that we need to ask ourselves? I'm going to go through a lot of questions. They don't always apply. I'll show you which ones did apply to this particular case. The first thing I need to ask myself is, how angry am I? Remember the Dylan story last time? What do we have to decide? What is my emotion? How high is it? And who's it directed at? So the first thing is to clarify that. See, who is my anger directed at? What's my underlying emotion? Well, applying it to my story, it was anger. I could call it frustration or other stuff like that. No, I was angry. And who is it directed at? My wife. And how high was it? Probably a 7. Next question. Is my anger appropriate? Probably not. So the reality check here. Is this how a normal person would react if their wife said that she wanted to go and buy something at a store? I don't think so. Do you? What boundary do I perceive was violated that created my anger? In this case, I think it probably had to do with respect. See, she's supposed to be a team player, right? And she's supposed to go along with what I need to do for my work and to be able to get these books and totally support me. Isn't that her role? She should be submissive to me, right, guys? Is the level appropriate? How angry should have I been in this situation, do you think? Maybe a 1 or a 2, if at all. So what do I know? I got something else going on here, or I'm not seeing this right. What's the effect on me? The worst effect in this particular story is I'm going to have to drive another 3-4 miles from home, come back up here and get the book the next day. What's the probable effect? Waste some gas, waste some time. So what do I sort of know here? This really probably isn't the whole thing that's going on here, because over that little bit I probably should not be as angry as I was. Because I just was angry and I didn't know exactly why. Next question. Am I importing anger to make it larger than life? I don't think I was. I don't think that was the main issue here that was going on. It wasn't that I had someone that disrespected me when I was a kid or some other things that were going on here. I don't think that's really what was happening here. Is this similar to things in the past? I couldn't think of anything in the past that this was similar to. Is it an ammunition dump or a landmine? You know, in my relationship with my wife, we don't have huge buried things or problems or other things like that from the past that haven't been dealt with. So therefore, no, I didn't think it was, but to understand it could be. It would not be at all. If this was similar to, let's just say, growing up, I was disrespected, and this was how my mom used to treat me or something, then that would pull all of that energy in and drop it on this problem. But in this particular case, I couldn't find anything like that. Is this repeated irritation? See, has she done this over and over and over? No. This is the first time. Was it the last straw? No, really, I wasn't overwhelmed in life, and this was the last straw. Have I been reacting passively and accumulating anger? No, I wasn't. This just came out of the blue. Boom. Am I using absolutes and overgeneralizations? Am I catastrophizing? Maybe. Because is it really true? See, if she isn't going along with my agenda at this time, does that mean this is going to be the beginning of a total rebellion and a total disaster in my marriage and everything's going to start falling apart? So if I was thinking that way at all, I was pretty much out of it. Am I self-angering? See, am I saying to myself, well, now, if she does this, then she's always going to do this, or this isn't fair? Or what am I saying to myself? I really didn't think I was really saying that much to myself. Monitor your self-talk. Remember, you can self-anger by what you're saying to yourself. So I was watching myself and seeing what I was saying, but this was one of these things that just sort of jumped out at me. What function does my anger serve? In this case, the only thing it served is I wouldn't have to drive about, 3-4 miles the next day and come up here and do this, and I could do it right now. Now, I have to admit that I'm the type of guy that likes to get things done right now and doesn't want to wait. So that probably was part of it. Part of my anger was probably frustration. In other words, this woman is holding me back from getting the stuff done that I need to get done, and she's working against me. But I think the biggest part was this feeling is she's supposed to be on my side. We work together as a team and everything else. And she is working against me, stopping me from accomplishing what I need to get done and making life harder. I think I'm blowing this up a little bit. I think there's something there a little bit, okay? Am I tired, hungry, or lonely? In drug alcohol, there's this saying, HALTs. Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And that's when people tend to relapse. I remember another particular story. And we were walking through the mall, and I said something, and my wife snapped at me like that. And she normally doesn't act that way. Normally passive and pretty nice and everything else, and all this. And I said to myself, okay, I did my little anger analysis. Okay, why is she angry? Well, we hadn't eaten anything for quite a while. So I wasn't dumb enough to say, honey, it's probably because you're hungry. Let's go get something to eat. No, I just said, honey, there's the food court. Let's go over and grab something. We had something and everything was fine. But see, if you don't understand what's causing the anger, then you can't really deal with it and do the appropriate things to solve it. Am I taking it personally? Yeah. See, was this the problem? Was she the problem? Well, we're going to have to analyze that and figure it out. How do I see life? See, am I catastrophizing because life is dangerous? No. I just see I got a lot of stuff I have to get done, and I'm trying to get it done. What is my underlying problem? And of course, I can layer cake this to a certain degree. First one, is my respect or self-worth involved? And the answer there is yes. To a certain degree, I felt disrespected, but it was more frustration trying to get something done, and that was going to be harder to get done because she was resisting what I wanted to do. Do I feel controlled? To a certain degree, because, we're going to have a mess here if I don't let her go over and go shopping or whatever. Have I brought this on myself? Yes. Probably that is true. Am I defending my pride? Maybe a little bit. What am I afraid of? It's just going to be harder to get things done, and I don't think I was really saying to myself, well, this is really she's in rebellion or something like that. Am I feeling lonely or isolated? No, I really wasn't. But now here comes the one that really applies the most. Can I see it from her point of view? Because, see, we have our point of view of how we see things. My point of view was this. Yes, I know that I told her that because of Sunday we shouldn't be going to stores. But see, to me, this was the donkey that fell in the well. You know what I mean? Because I could go over there and get the book, and then it would save me time. So this was an exception to, not doing work on the Sabbath day. So do you see how I could justify mine completely, but hers wasn't justified at all, right? Because she could have said the same thing, couldn't she? Well, we're out here, we're already driving, we could just drop these returns off on the way, and it would save gas. So she could have said the same thing that I said. And she could have felt the same way. So I'm starting to get empathy and starting seeing what's going on. And of course I realized, the question is, why did they do what they did? And the answer I had to say to myself is this. I told her the rule was, we're not going to do any shopping on Sunday. But the rule doesn't apply to me. It only applies to you. Do you think maybe she felt this was a little bit unfair? Do you think that maybe that was the real issue? And so when I began to see it from her point of view, then I say, well, I could see why she could feel I was being unfair and why this was the wrong thing. Is this a lack of communication? To a certain degree, because I didn't realize what was going on. Was it really intentional? No, I wasn't trying to do something intentional, and she wasn't doing things. She was just reacting to feel that I had a double standard here. So what was my part in causing it? By not thinking what I was saying, by basically restricting her and not going by the same rules. What shortcomings in them caused them to do it? She just likes things fair. Am I perfect? Probably not. Have I ever made the same mistake or done a similar thing? Probably some point in my life. Then is layer caking involved? Analysis of ammunition dumps and landmines. I really didn't think so in this particular case. How about defenses? Probably not. What's my overall analysis? My analysis is that I didn't realize the way I was coming across to her, and she was reacting, to that event. She wasn't reacting to me. See what I did? I took it personally that this has to do with her not supporting me, her resisting me, and it really simply had to, her basically setting a boundary saying what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And so after I saw it that way, I said, honey, you're right. You know, if you want to go over to Linen and Things, I'll run over and get my book, and that's fair. And I'm not sure if I offered this or not, but I should have if I didn't. And if you want to, we can drop off your things at the, or you want to drop them off. Because we need to be fair in this relationship, and I'm sorry, I wasn't being fair. I'm not sure I was that apologetic, by the way, but... But do you see how it works, and do you see how the anger and how you go through sort of this checklist? You don't have to remember all those points, but that's the checklist that you use to try and figure out what's going on, because then you can use your anger appropriately to resolve the problem. Do you see that? And once I use my anger appropriately to resolve the problem would just disappear. Let's take another example. Same thing for a little bit. Here we are, Sunday again, right? Only this Sunday, I was preaching that night. And I didn't have my sermon prepared. How do you think I'm feeling? You're going to do some analysis here. I'm giving you a picture. I want you to analyze this particular picture as we're going along. What's happening here in anger? And guess what? There is a sale at the mall. And my kids need some clothes. So what do you think my wife wants to do? It's one of those donkeys in the well thing again, right? The sale's only there for that day, and we need to get the clothes so it justifies. So we go to the mall, and they shop, and they shop, and they shop, and they shop. What do you think is going on inside of me? The longer it goes, honey, we need to go. You know, finally, after a significant period of time, in fact, I only had an hour left to do my sermon at that point, we get done and leave. And the way home, what do you think I ought to do? Bring up the issue. I say, honey, I'm really a little bit angry because we went there and we took so much time. Now I have to get a sermon prepared in just an hour. You know what she said? Honey, I didn't know you were preaching tonight. I would have left right away. What's the anger analysis? Let's analyze that one. What's it saying? Communication. So we made a little agreement. From now on, if I'm preaching on a Sunday evening and I don't have my sermon, then I need to let her know, and we won't go shopping. Or we'll only go shopping for an hour. Or whatever we need, because she wants to totally support me. But do you see, when you figure it out, and then you can use the energy to resolve the problem. And that's what we're talking about this. If you can't figure it out, you don't know how to apply your energy effectively to resolve the problem and take care of it so the energy is used up. So now, how do we get ourselves in these messes? How do we get long-term anger problems? Well, there are two basic possibilities. The first one is you didn't use your anger correctly in the first place. The second one is there are deep needs and experiences from the past that are coming in, the ammunition dumps, the landmines, the stuff that hasn't been processed like it should have been growing up in your family of origin or in your experiences or other things that are going on. So let's take a look at those. First one is long-term anger problem. Remember, these are the sticks of dynamite things we went over last time? The first one is aggression. When a person is aggressive with their anger, what effects does that have long-term? Rage, addictive anger, in order to get power, in order to defend yourself. It was basically once you use that, and let's say I get aggressive and I scare all of you in this class, so you all act nice. What just happened? Behavior modification. It worked. So I'm going to be tempted to do what? Use it more often. If I feel powerful, let's say I'm feeling powerless, and I get angry and I rage and I jump up and down and everybody steps into line, I'm going to learn to be an angry person. How do you deal with people in these situations? First, let's deal with rage. Rage, remember, is the confused anger. You've got to sort that one out. See, where is the pain? Where's the fear? Where's the anger? Where's the responsibility? We have to do an anger analysis on the rage. Now, rage is different than some other types of anger because sometimes you have to let it out to figure out what it's all about because it's so confused. And this is where a punching bag or something like that might be necessary, or beat up a pillow or something, until you can really get in touch with what's going on. That in other cases, that isn't a good idea because sometimes you're just reinforcing your anger or your expressions. There's a lot of controversy over that. But in the case of rage, sometimes that's necessary. Free-floating anger. This is where you're walking around at a 7 all the time. What do we have to do? Discover the underlying cause. In fact, just this week, I had a client that I spent quite a bit of time doing analysis, trying to figure out why was it, because they came in and they said they were a 4. And we had to figure out why they were at a 4 all the time, because that was going to affect their overall anger. I always investigate their worldview, because if they see the world as a sea of sharks and you're going to be devoured if you show any vulnerability, then you already know why they have free-floating anger. It's based on the fear. And investigate buried anger. What is the stuff underneath? As I said, try to get anger release in a safe environment, and then you can maybe use behavior modification to help them go against. See, if they've learned this because it works, then you want to use behavior modification the other way. And if there are consequences to their anger outbursts or to their raging. And then maybe go to the whole grease slide thing and try and teach them how to take timeouts, how to stop themselves, catch themselves before they're on the grease slide, crashing down and going into this rage. Protective anger. Why would a person just lose it? Had a particular client, and I really had a fear for this client, that he was going to end up fired or in jail. Now, I understood what was going on, but I was afraid some other people weren't going to understand. Because what would happen is if he got any fear someone was going to take advantage of him in any way, or he felt threatened in any way, the stuff that came out of his mouth was stuff like, I'm going to take you and skin you alive and beat you to a pulp and throw you off the nearest bridge. That's what he'd say to people. But why was he doing that? That's how he got them to back off. That was him going, click, click, back off. But he had learned that, and because it worked, that's the way he operated at work and in relationships. And I was just concerned if he got the wrong person that he tried that with, we might have a real problem. And finally, addictive anger. This is still all under people that have an aggression problem. Have to find the powerlessness underneath, because usually it's a matter that I get addicted to it because I feel powerful, because it feels like I can control my life. I can be in charge of things if I express my anger in this particular way, and I'll keep doing it over and over again. We want them to turn their anger over to God and trust in God to make them powerful, instead themselves, and of course use theophostic ministry to try and deal with this. And then what we usually do in this kind of thing, especially domestic violence, is we set tripwires. Tripwires are a set of boundaries with consequences. Like a tripwire might be, if this person is starting to get angry and other people in the family identify it, they have to go for a walk. But if they say anything, then they leave for the day. If they start cussing, yelling, and screaming, they have to leave for a week. If they get domestically violent, they leave for a month. Do you see the tripwires? And as we want them never to get to the end, we want them to see it over here and stop and get the consequences here before they get to that place. Again, it's more like the grease slide. We're trying to catch them at different levels, but have consequences for that. The next wrong way of using anger is displacement. That's what we call the landmines. Because if you displace it on somebody else, that person doesn't know what's going on. They're just walking through the sand and happen to hit this thing and get their foot blown off. You need to ID the family of origin issues, because landmines come from the family of origin. Sometimes they're huge. Just another client, because I couldn't figure out why this couple was having all the struggles that they were having until we did some real analysis of their family of origin. And what we found out is that she had all these landmines. Like, as an example, her dad didn't want her to go to college. And they were poor, and they had all these different landmines. Well, guess what? He had done a perfect job of stepping on every single one of them. As an example, as soon as they got married, because he had his own issues of insecurity, he didn't want her to go back and get her master's degree because it would cost money, and he wanted to save up a bunch of money so they had security in the bank before she did that. And then when she did it anyway, he wouldn't give her a car, which is the same thing her dad had done. So do you see how much conflict we had and how much problems we had underlying all of this? And so we had all these explosions that were going on in the marriage and all this negative stuff, but they were really stuff that he was doing very similar to what happened to her in the family of origin. And again, we want to use theophostic ministry, go back and deal with those family of origin issues, identify them, bring them to light so people can see what's going on. And you realize it isn't what happened right now, it's what happened back there that is causing these things to happen. How about passive aggression? Well, it leads to what we call dead cats under the carpet. A whole lot of things and offenses that have happened that pile up until the whole place stinks. What we need to do is go back and tear up the carpet, take care of all those issues that were not dealt with because the person was afraid of confrontation, and deal with them, use the anger appropriate to deal with those particular areas in the person's life, and get forgiveness for all of that and clean that whole mess out. Stuffing it. This is what we call ammunition dumps. What would you think if we walked out here in the field over here by the church, and I took a little firecracker about that big and I lit it and I threw it out in the field and the entire city of Wichita blew up? Well, either it's a very powerful firecracker or we were standing on the top of an ammunition dump. See, the one firecracker set off all the rest of them. And a person who stuffs things, like my picture last time, they now have dynamite sticking out of both their ears, out of their nose, 5 out of their mouth, 1 in every one of their pockets, and somebody lights a match. How do you identify this? You get this huge explosion when it should have been something small. It's absolutely huge. And what do we have to do? Well, we're going to have to go back and find all the ammunition dump and defuse all those bombs one at a time, deal with all those issues in whatever way we can, and probably some theophostic ministry to deal with those past experiences and issues. How about depression? That's anger turned inward. The person feels hopeless. Again, we have to go and deal with the stuff that caused them to be hopeless, the way they're looking at life, and change those around in the life and process it. Do you see what I'm saying? We're using the anger that we have, and we're using it up to process the things in the past, just like we need to process the things in the future. If you don't use it up, it's always going to be there, and you're going to get these interesting reactions. What if the person personalizes it? It turns to hatred. It turns to bitterness. They see the other person as the problem. They hold a grudge against them, and then you have all sorts of relationship problems and stuff that goes on there. You need to deal with the bitterness and the hate, but you've got to solve the problem. You've got to dig those things out, find out why they hate, and resolve the relationship problems. We need to deal with what we call the tension rage cycle. And we need to understand this cycle to be able to deal with it. And especially if you're working in the area of domestic violence, when we get to that in our course here, you're going to learn more about this particular cycle. But what it generally is this. The person sort of feels a tension building, and they're unable to release their anger, and it keeps building and building and building till there's a big explosion, and then they go down and start over. And of course then they promise, oh, I'll never do it again, it'll never happen, etc., but it will happen over and over and over again. And you'll find if you talk to the family that in many cases the family will tell you, oh, we know exactly where it's at. In fact, we all go hide. I had one lady put it like this. My husband is a balloon. And he blows and he gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm the pin. I had one of these situations so bad that what we had to do to deal with it is that we would have them come into counseling once a week, and I would have him vent his anger in the counseling session. It was like you could cut it with a knife and deal with it and let him explode there so he wouldn't be exploding at home on his family. At least it was a safe environment. Now, what's the issue underneath this one? This is important you get this issue. The issue underneath it is a belief that you're supposed to be in control. Because if I really believe that I'm supposed to be in control and I go out in life, how in control are you really in life? You're not. And so things happen. But if every time something happens that makes me feel out of control, I get angry and I can't dump that anger, what goes on? I build. But I don't know how to dump the anger, so just little stuff builds up. This one particular guy, we could tell where he was. Because initially, he's frustrated at work, he's frustrated here, and so on and so forth. When we got to the midpoint of this cycle, it all changed. Because now he personalized it, it was all those women. See, he was brought up in a family where his dad was in the army, and all mom and sisters were all there, and he felt mistreated by them. So when things don't go right, his tendency is to blame women. And guess what he had in his family? 2 girls and a boy, and a wife. And all of a sudden, they were the problem. And it would keep building until we had a major explosion. And then that would recycle over and over and over again. So in dealing with this one, you have to help them understand that they aren't in control, they're not going to be in control, and you have to help them find some way to dump that anger. Remember, what are they violating? Remember the Bible verse, don't let the sun go down in your wrath? They're building. And so we got to get their sun down. We got to get them down to a 1 every night. So we don't end up with this cycle going on and on and on, and these explosions going on, and the different things that are going in the problems that are there. The last one is catastrophizing. When we handle our anger wrong and we catastrophize, we build it up, we layer cake it, we make it into something much bigger than it is. This happens again very much in domestic violence. In domestic violence, the person they're afraid that their mate might leave them, and you understand if their mate is 5 minutes late, it must mean they're having an affair, right? Had one particular lady, she was so jealous and so struggling with this that her husband was actually bringing her home the time cards. It was only about 15 minutes between the time he left home and went to work and 15 minutes when he came home. I finally had to say to her, you know what? If he is having an affair, he's really good. If he can do it in that amount of time and still drive from work home. But see, I had to challenge the validity of her catastrophizing, because she was blowing things into this huge thing that they couldn't have possibly been. But why? Issues from the past come up. Things are there. There are these other feelings there, and the logic really isn't fitting the overall situation. So the next is underlying long-term problems. If you want a reference here, you can go to the anger workbook. And the anger workbook will help you look at these, but these are the needs inside of the person that is causing the problem. Self-worth is a huge one. I remember I was driving down, I think it was on Hillside, and came up to this light, and there was this car next to me, and this guy was trying to talk to me. And so I rolled down my window and said, "What is it that you want?" Well, he was pretty angry. It was a gang member. And of course, he was trying to stare me down. I rolled the window up and acted very nice and kept on driving. But the point being, there are people who've been killed for that. Why? The chip on the shoulder. I feel insecure, I feel worthless, so if you do anything that even makes me feel the slightest bit like I'm worthless, I attack you. Significance. What does that resolve into? Pride, respect issues. The same domestically violent person, every time he went after his kids and we would analyze it, guess what we came up with? His kids weren't respecting him. If the kids did anything that was like without respect, he was going to teach them to respect him, right? Chase them down the hall, beat them up, whatever. But they were going to respect him. What's that really saying about the person? How do they feel about themselves? They're not important. They have to force other people to respect them because of how they feel about themselves inside. Love, loneliness. How many anger problems do you think we get because people feel unloved? So they grab you by the throat and say, "Love me or I'll punch your lights out." That help them get love? See, codependency, we have all this junk that is going on and all this fighting that is going on and all these huge anger problems that are going on because they're desperately trying to get their needs met. If you want to get a primer in this kind of anger problems, watch the soap operas. Because that's what they're all about. Everyone desperately trying to get their needs met and using and abusing each other and playing all these games and all this junk. And they're all angry and bitter and everything you can imagine. Well, when you're doing your anger analysis, you're going to find that that's true sometimes. But what is the core issue? We want to get down to these needs, because if we can help them deal with that, especially through God, then the anger problem is going to get worked out, and we're not going to have this ongoing anger like we're talking about here. Security. Security issues usually come down to control. How many people like to be in control? How many controlling people do we have out there? Well, see, if I can make you act the way I want you to act and treat me the way I want you to treat me, then I'll be okay. And if I feel out of control, I'm going to feel insecure and desperate, and I'm going to get in control some way. Remember, anger is just energy to resolve a problem. Do I have a problem? Yeah, all these needs are problems. So therefore, I'm going to have anger, and if I catastrophize, the bigger these needs are, the bigger my problem is, the more anger I'm going to have, and it's going to come out and deal with a lot of things in the person's life. Another one is fear. If I'm afraid, do I have a problem usually? I wouldn't be afraid if I don't have a problem, if I don't think I'm going to endanger, or somebody is going to attack me, or something is going to happen to me. So automatically I'm going to get some anger to do something about it. I'll have the fear to run away from it, but then what am I going to do? Give you another example of this. I had this client that was sent to me by his boss. Because this guy came across his work as, you look at me cross-eyed and your history. And he was filing complaints, like 3 or 4 a month, on the company for every little thing that ever happened to him, or if everything didn't go right, he would file another personnel complaint. And people didn't want to be around him. We got him into therapy and we did some analysis. The point is, he was afraid people were going to take advantage of him. And so the best solution was to attack. If he came across as mean, if he came across that I'm going to skin you alive, if he came across that he was going to get you before you got him, people would stay away from him, and he never got abused and never got hurt again, right? Good solution. Unless you want to have a relationship. Unfortunately, that one didn't turn out too good, because even when we identified and I showed him what it was, he said, I understand, but I'm not changing. This is what works. See, unfortunately, in his life, that's the way he was able to protect himself, and he saw the life as very scary and dangerous. He had fears, and that's the way he could cope. And everybody kept away from him, and he didn't get hurt, right? And he wasn't about ready to deal with that and become vulnerable, but he lost his relationships due to that. In fact, today, his boss is just waiting for him to retire, because she has so many hassles and so many problems with him every day. All these complaints, all these write-ups for everything you can think of. Because anyone sneezes, and it's a huge issue. But that's how he makes himself safe and keeps everybody away. Guilt. Do I want to feel guilty? Do I want to feel ashamed? And if I feel you're making me guilty, or even if I feel that you are sort of better than I am, had one particular lady, could not remain in a church service. We tried to get her to go in a church service, she would always get up and leave. Because all those righteous people in there and being around God made her feel guilty. And she didn't want to feel guilty. So she was angry. Of course, to see how she saw things. It was all on her and what was going on. What would we have to do? Deal with each one of these issues. Deal with the needs. Deal with the guilt. Deal with the fear. Fairness is a big one. I actually had one couple that I had to see 3 times a week. It's the only way I could keep their marriage together. You know what the fight was about? The ceiling fan. Who was going to turn the ceiling fan on and who was going to turn it off? Who had the right to control the ceiling fan? Now, do you think that was really the issue? Well, it was to a certain degree. See, the way he saw the marriage is that he had lost his job and lost all this money because of her and her debts that she brought into the marriage. So she owed him something. See, big scale of fairness. Because she owes me something, I ought to have a right to control the ceiling fan, to do everything that I want to do. How do you think she saw it? Little scale. Fair is, you use it one time, I use it next time. Or you put covers on and I run the ceiling fan. When they finally understood that and got a hold of why they were so angry and where this was coming from their past, then they got by this and were able to work it through, and they're still married today and doing fine. But you're going to find the anger built into everything that is going on here. Self-will. If you want to really see something that makes people angry, it is somebody that is their own God, running their own show, doing their own thing, and they are going to be in charge. We call it an imperative person. In other words, I have the right answer and you're wrong. It's my way or the highway. Why are they doing that? Because they feel so inadequate. See, in counseling, I always think the opposite. When you see the symptom, it's probably the opposite that's causing the symptom. Why are they reacting so hard? Why can't they listen to somebody else? Why do they have to have all the right answers? It says more about what's inside of them than what's really going on. So let's put this together, and now let's put it sort of into an overall plan. What are the tools that we have in the area of overall anger management? Well, the first is awareness. We need to sort of understand about anger and what's going on, and hopefully we've given that to you. The second is self-knowledge. I need to understand myself. I need to understand why other people are doing what they're doing, what's happened to me, how do I react to things. I need analysis that we just talked about today. I need to deal with my own needs. And finally, I need skills and tools. What are the skills and tools? We've already talked about most of them. One is self-talk. What you say to yourself, how you look at things. Another is relaxation and breathing. See, there's certain things you can't do and be angry and afraid at the same time. And one of those is being relaxed. And finally, venting in some cases is appropriate to get something to the surface so you can get a hold of it. Now let's look at a standard program. And what I'm going to do is just add a few things to a standard program that the U.S. government puts out, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. If you want to get these free copies, you can get them from www.samhsa.gov. And what they give you is a very basic anger management program. What I'm going to do is suggest some more things to Christianize this and to add a couple pieces in there that maybe are not in there, so you have a nice free method that you can use in helping people with anger management. They start out in section 1. In section 1, they talk about anger is a feeling or an emotion that ranges from mild irritation to intense fury and rage. Anger and aggression are not the same thing. See, I can be angry, that doesn't mean I have to take it out on somebody. I'm going to add into that it's an emotion from God. Anger becomes a problem when it is felt too intensely, too frequently, or is expressed inappropriately. See, we completely agree with that. Using anger in a wrong way is what makes it negative. What are some of the myths of anger? Anger is inherited. Not true. Anger automatically leads to aggression. No, you can use it appropriately. You must be aggressive to get what you want. No, being assertive works a lot better. Venting anger is always desirable. It's not. There are certain cases when it's desirable in a safe environment. Anger can become a habit, definitely. It can be an addiction. And they talk about the anger meter. In my case, those are the 10 steps of the grease slide that we're talking about. And of course, there are ways that you can determine how angry you are. Physical, behavior, emotional, cognitive. This is more of a review. Do you understand? I've covered all this material. I'm just showing you how it's put together in an overall program. It can be triggered by events in your life. Then they talk about anger control plans. These are simply the boundaries we talked about, the timeout, the relaxation through breathing. Then they talk about the aggression cycle, the escalation, explosion, post-explosion, and so on. What did I call that? That was the tension rage cycle. At that particular point, and I'm in section 4 at this time, I would add anger analysis. They don't talk about analyze anger at all in this particular workbook, but I suggest you add that in there. Then they talk about cognitive restructuring, which is how you look at things. The activating agent, the beliefs, the consequences, the dispute, and the emotional change. That's really rational emotive therapy. They add thought stopping. You know, how do you stop your thoughts? But I add in Christian self-talk. You know, what would Jesus do? How would God look at this? Is the world falling in? Is God wringing his hands? Stuff that you can use from Christianity to talk yourself down. Then I would add in, what does the Bible say? They have different review sections in here, and I would replace those with going through the Bible verses like we did last time. And put those all in there, the wrong and the right uses. Then they deal with assertiveness. We've talked about that. That's using boundaries, respecting other people's boundaries, doing it in a way that you don't cause problems. Talk about God's boundary method. Then they talk about a conflict resolution model. How do you work through conflict? They talk about anger in the family. These are your family of origin issues. And they talk about the roles in the family, the messages you receive. That's your life map. And then again, I would add in theophostic. All I'm saying is you can take this basic program, add some Christian things in there, and you have a whole program for dealing with anger in the lives of your clients. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you have given us this wonderful gift of anger. And Lord, that you've helped us and you'll give us wisdom how to analyze it, how to figure it out, how to deal with it. Lord, that it can be a blessing and be used constructive in the lives of our clients and our own lives. And we give you all the glory and the honor in Jesus' name. Amen.
Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer.